We're recording. Hello, guys. Welcome to our new podcast. And we've got our first guest on today. This is Dinara, all the way from Nice in France. Dinara's here to speak to us today about all things female hormone related, periods, and all that jazz. Dinara, hello. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you again about the topic that I love talking about so much.
Woo. Could you start off and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do? Yeah, give us the
Yeah.
rundown.
Definitely. So, as mentioned, I'm Dinara. I currently live in the south of France, in Nice, and I sort of escaped here after living in London and in rainy Vancouver, deciding that I actually need vitamin D. Not only was it useful for my mood and my hormones, but just for my mental health in general. So that's sort of general where I'm at. And my day job is hormone and nutrition coach, and I basically work with women of all ages, anywhere from 20 up until 50s, to help them to navigate hormonal health by helping them get to the root cause of whatever the problem of the hormonal issues are, so we can resolve those symptoms and basically allow women to have empowerment, advocacy, self-body awareness, understanding how their bodies work, so we can eliminate symptoms, create healthy habits, and feel great in their bodies.
100%. Something that's
Mhm.
totally needed in our society,
Mhm.
definitely. Is there something in your own life that triggered you to want to get into this kind of work?
Yeah, I love this question. I think oftentimes when we end up in health and wellness, we usually there because we want to fix our own things or we just
Yes.
really get really super curious. And for me, well, I sort of had quite the journey, and I think it's very similar to many women's journey. But in my case, I used to have extremely painful periods. Sort of in my early 20s, they started to get really, really bad to the point that a couple times I actually had to call an ambulance because the
Mm.
period pain would just get so bad that doctors, I simply was like, it's not a period, this is an appendix that ruptured. Because of course you do a bit of a Google, you immediately diagnose yourself that it's an appendix, you call the ambulance, they arrived, and they're like, no, 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 this is not an appendix, everything is actually fine, and this is just your period pain. And I think the frustrating use of language of just your period pain, so
Mm.
many women face this discomfort, both emotional and both physical, and unfortunately we're being told that it's just part of being a woman, the discomfort that we're experiencing. But in my case, the period pain was so painful that I had to resolve it because it was taking me away from school, from work, and from my daily activities. So I went to the doctors and I walked out within 10 minutes with a prescription for the magic pill for the birth control to sort of that was promised that it's going to get rid of my pain and I'll just start feeling amazing. I got on birth control, and shortly after, I started to develop a lot of anxiety, mood disorders, not something that was normal for me. And also, I started to gain weight pretty rapidly. And I think with a girl in your sort of mid early 20s, at the time, of course, I really did care about the way that I looked. So this weight all of a sudden just made
Mm.
no sense. And then something clicked in me that I think it's the hormonal birth control. But hormonal birth control, I thought that it would get rid of my period pain. It also didn't really get rid of the pain that massively. So I decided to come off of the birth control, deciding that it doesn't work for me. Went back to the doctors and they put me on a different type of birth control. That also didn't work for me. Then they put me onto IUD, which is the intrauterine device. So I basically tried all of the medical solutions that were possibly offered to women with painful periods and just couldn't find it. I decided to come off of all of the birth control and to figure it out myself. And I started, that weight gain still really bothered me and the periods were really painful. But at that point, I didn't really connect the two. They just seemed like such a different issue. And I think in conventional medicine, we often look at the body as these separate parts without really connecting it. So friends at the time recommended that I read a book on menstrual cycles. And I was one of those people that I was a tomboy. I used to love hanging out with boys. Like I never really didn't want to talk about my periods. I just knew that I hated them. And as I was reading about the menstrual cycle, I've realized that my body doesn't just go through presence and absence of period every single month. There is actually a whole fluctuations of hormones that quite literally change the way that I show up in the world, how I should eat and how I should exercise. And I was like, what the hell? I'll give it a try. And I've tried eating with my cycle, really listening to my body and my hormones. And no joke, Jess, like the period went away within a couple of cycles. The weight started to come off, but it was less so, I've realized it was less so weight. It was a lot of inflammation that my body was holding on to. And
Mm.
as it all sort of came down, I was like, I've got a secret to the universe. I need to tell every woman about their periods, and just it's not just the periods. And talking to my friends, I've realized that they don't know this information. And that's when I decided that I'm going to get certified and start actually helping women and help them with understanding their bodies, creating awareness, and really, really befriend their menstrual cycle, because it has so much information and we're so lucky to have it on a monthly basis. But of course, the narrative out there is that we not lucky to have it. But I'm out there to change that narrative and help women to understand their body and actually love their cycles along with many other parts of their bodies.
Amazing. Yeah, I love stories where people take control of their own health, and it reminds us that ultimately we do know our bodies better than anyone else. You know, it's great that we have doctors, it's great that we have all this health and help, and it's needed when it's needed, but women are struggling particularly in this issue, and it makes sense that girls hate their period. So many of my friends, you know, they're like, I just, it's an effort to have it. I want to be on the pill because then I don't have to deal with it. That's how we see it.
Yes.
We, you know, dealing with something. And it's because periods are, you know, so painful. They're so heavy. They contribute to our, you know, our moods going up and down. We lose sight of our identity. And I guess that brings me on to my next point of, is that normal? Is how, because of all these struggles that women face with their period, is it normal their moods are going this way, that they're so heavy and that they're so painful?
Yeah. Well, the fact that women live in pain and discomfort, it would be absolutely weird if by the creation we designed women for 50% of the population to live in constant discomfort. So it's certainly not normal, and it is extremely common, which I think why sometimes we accept it as normal, but it's definitely not normal. And in fact, painful periods are not normal. Your periods are meant to arrive without, except maybe needing a bit of a water bottle and a bit of rest. We shouldn't need more than that. And
Mm.
usually when we do experiencing those things, it's usually some sort of imbalances. Oftentimes it's a lot, really the answer lies in our lifestyle. And as women, I mean, as people within 21st century, we sort of been created in this convenience life where we just quickly grab a sandwich, quickly grab fast food, when we're just grabbing these foods that are so highly inflammatory for our bodies. And because they create inflammation, the period itself is actually inflammation. And when we really think about it, like if you had a wound where you cut your hand and then it kind of heals, women's bodies are so incredible. They experience it on a monthly basis. We've got this massive womb that our uterine lining creates and that it's shedding, and body is able to heal itself and sort of stop the pain and do the cycle over and over again. And this particular process is meant to be just this sort of natural thing, and that's kind of how it was historically. But with the creation of the fast foods, the inflammatory foods, the stress, the lack of sleep, the obsession with our phones, our body is just under so much stress. And for women, it often rebels through our menstrual cycle, and that's when we usually experience those things. So when we look at period, the normal thing when it comes to menstrual cycle is to have a cycle that's anywhere between 26 to 34 days long. It's normal for it to vary by couple of days. Maybe one cycle is 26 days, another 28, next 29. It's okay to vary by 1 or 2 days. It also shouldn't be longer than 34 days. We shouldn't be using more than 6 tampons or pads per day. That's considered to be very heavy period. And when that happens, we lose a lot of iron, meaning that our energy is draining, and it's much faster for us to get anemia, which is which can have very negative effect both on our bodies and our brains. And it's also, our period should last about 3 to 7 days. It's sort of if within you fall within that range, then it's normal. And it shouldn't arrive with extreme pain and extreme mood swings. It should sort of come and normal to experience a bit of a low energy, hot water bottle, and then it sort of should pass. And that's what my experience of my cycle is now. I can confidently say that I do love my period, because I just know how my body changes, but it doesn't change majorly. I'm not going through crazy fluctuations. And for women, it's really to just understand how to bring our body into balance, because within medical research, since the medicine was invented 480 years ago now, for 450 years we had never studied women. We've always used male as a standard body, because male don't have periods, their cycles, they don't have menstrual cycles, they can't get pregnant, they don't go through menopause. So studying women was just too complicated. But the fact that it's complicated, it doesn't mean that it's the thing that we shouldn't study. So for 450 years, we didn't have any research on women, and we only started, I think the first women walked into clinical trials in 1993, which is fairly recent. And out of the entire funding that goes towards health, it's only 2.5% goes towards women's health. So it's really not surprising that
Yeah.
2.5% going into the 50% of the population, and so many women just sort of walking blind and feeling lonely in their struggles, feeling like they're the only one, when really the problem is systemic. But it is true that it's on us at the moment until we're waiting for the system to catch up to really take care of our bodies and take the best care of ourselves as we can.
Yeah, 100%. I actually just did my dissertation for the end of my year on PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. For those who don't know, it's when women get severely depressed in the luteal phase, like it's specifically confined to the phase just before your period.
Mhm.
And obviously, I had to look at a lot of research for it. And what I noticed is that it is it's understandable why we have used males for so long, because it is so difficult to conduct research on women because we are so individualized in our fluctuations of our hormones, in the lengths of our cycles. It's very difficult to just say, okay, we've got a group of women, they're all going to act and react in the same way, they're going to have their ovulation at the same time. It's totally different, which makes sense why the work you're doing is important, because individual care, listening to our bodies, the intuition is so critical as a woman, I think. Do you agree?
100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Also, previously you mentioned inflammation, and this is the buzzword at the moment, right? And I
Yeah.
think we're realizing a lot that inflammation is also connected to, mental health disorders as well as,
Yeah.
period issues and stuff. So you mentioned that inflammation was due to nutrition, so what you were eating. I'm wondering if there's also stress, you mentioned, if there's an emotional connection to inflammation. Is the way that we feel, is suppressing emotions contributing to anything like that? Have you ever heard of anything about that?
Oh my goodness, 100%. So inflammation, based on World Health Organization, they recently put out a stat to say that inflammation will kill more people in the 21st century than any other
Mm,
disease or any combined. So inflammation is very much on the rise. And when we think about what is inflammation really, inflammation is your body's defense system in order to protect it from danger.
mm,
Like when we cut our hand and we have a big sort of cut or bruise, it gets all red, and it's basically we have a lot of these antibodies that are trying to come in and to protect itself from bacteria and sort of basically heal the thing as fast as possible. So inherently, inflammation is not really a bad thing. It's a defense mechanism that our body uses in order to protect us. However, when inflammation is ongoing and is just not healing and we're sort of layering things on top of it, that's what creates chronic inflammation, and that creates a lot of problems. So, and chronic inflammation could be so many things, as you said, the physical things, the foods that we're eating that are some of the biggest things that contributes to things like infertility, the painful periods, and a lot of reproductive organs is our fast food diet. Fast
mm,
food diet is probably one of the worst things that could have possibly happened to female body. Another thing that contributes is this thing that we had in the 90s and early 2000s. There's research that came out that was misread and misrepresented that said that we shouldn't have any fats. So all of a sudden, everybody went into this low fat diet, and all of a sudden, everybody started to eat excess amount of carbohydrates and all of those things, which again was just created so many problems.
mm,
And then of course, as you mentioned, the stress. So when the body is stressed in general, the cortisol hormone is actually very beneficial for our body. We need stress in order to survive, in order to, when you walk down the dark alley and then you hear the sound behind you, your cortisol starts to release, your blood takes out of the important organs and goes into your muscles so you can run away from danger. So it's extremely useful. However, then that stress response comes down and we go
mm,
back about our day. Or when we have exercise, stress hormone goes up, and stress hormone itself actually anti-inflammatory. It reduces the inflammation to give you energy to run from things away. But if we have this boundary that we're not able to set, and people constantly cross our boundaries where we just feel like, I can't say it, I shouldn't be saying these things, I should say these things. This is constantly how to have this low grade inflammation of releasing this stress hormones that just create more and more inflammation. If we're unable to speak up for ourselves, if we in a situation where we, like, one of the things I recently read, I think somewhere probably on Instagram, one of the hardest systems and one of the easiest things on our nervous system is actually the people that we surround ourselves. So we can surround ourselves with people that are very loving, we feel relaxed and at
mm,
peace. Or obviously we at work, we oftentimes forced to sort of collaborate certain people that just make us like, we could feel our shoulders get shrugged, our tummy hurts, and it's like this, our body is clearly having this reaction. And it's really learning to regulate, down-regulate, because all of these things, those they create in our mind. And most of our stress today, it's 70% of the stress that affects women is perceived. So it's not real. We don't actually have a lot of danger. We don't have people running after us. It's all perceived things. It's all the emotions that we don't process. It's all the people that we may be unable to speak up for ourselves because we've been conditioned to be a good girl and not really speak back and maybe be like a nice person, quote unquote, because it's certainly not nice when your health gets affected. And it
Yeah.
just creates this sort of vicious cycle. But yes, emotional aspect is huge when it comes to inflammation and hormones.
Have you ever noticed in clients, women that maybe, I don't know, seek therapy or are able to release their emotions, notice a significant improvement in their periods and pain?
Yeah, well, I think I'm actually the perfect example for that because I was somebody who absolutely hated my periods. I hated them. I didn't want to. I remember a number of occasions where I said, I just want to be a boy. Like, I wish I was a boy so I didn't have to deal with it. Of course, a lot of my friends were boys, so it just seemed like a really normal thing for me to wish. And just really declining anything to do with my sexuality and my. A big part of it is also creativity. For a long time, I wasn't the person that was able to draw, so I just assumed that I put this label on myself of not being creative. And this sort of the second chakra, if we get a bit woo-woo, we have this like seven chakras within our body, which are these energy centers. But the sacral chakra is that orange chakra, which are around our reproductive organs, and that is our chakra of creativity. And when we think about it, this is when our reproductive organs are living. This is where women create literally create lives from. And it's that portion that I was always shutting down. I'm just not very creative. I'm not very creative. And sort of saying those things continuously over and over. Of course, today my work it's all creativity. I have to come up with creative ways saying things, describing things, storytelling. And for a long time, I just rejected the part of the feminine part of me and also the part of the creativity in me. And I think, and also not being friends with women and being a lot of friends with men for a very long time. And as I started to learn about the menstrual cycle and really invite this sort of, at first it was a bit weird and scary, but then it's like my female body sort of came into my own. I started to feel just much more confident. I started to express the creativity much more, was able to process those emotions, to actually move from the labels, I'm not creative, to maybe I am creative, to like, actually, I'm a ball of creativity, and also waking up that sexual energy. And you can do a lot of meditations. Sexual energy doesn't mean necessarily to have sex. It's more so just having that creative energy, and you can activate it through meditations and sort of bring it up and really use it for creativity. And I often, and to some of my friends who I spoke about it, whose periods got better, we had these conversations and we're like, I think the big part that our periods got less painful, we're so much more comfortable in our bodies and just really unlocking that emotional aspect that we rejected for so long. And now we're allowing for that energy to flow through. It's just absolutely beautiful. I also had
100%.
another friend
Yeah.
who had just came to mind. She had a challenging relationship with her mother, and it's
Mm.
one of the things that she had such a painful periods, and now she started to heal that relationship with her mom and heal that relationship, sort of that feminine part of her, really heal that inner child. Her period pain went away, and she was just sharing with me how it's just such a big thing as we work through our relationship, through our moments. It's like it's that energy point just opens up, and it's really just such a beautiful thing. It's a bit woo-woo
Yeah.
for some people, especially if you like hard, but like we really are walking energies if we really think about it.
Yeah, and it emphasizes the body-mind connection that we devalue,
Mhm.
right? Like fully being an acceptance of who you are, how you feel inside, and letting it out. It makes sense. And it seems woo-woo until you experience it yourself, I think,
Yeah.
which
Mhm.
is crazy. But yeah, for women out there who are, struggling with symptoms at all, what would you say are some notable, maybe physical symptoms that are visible, or even maybe some significant emotional ones that they can pick up on and be like, okay, something's maybe not right with my hormones here?
Yeah. So many different things that that are sort of um could signify body. And typically it's if you go from being feeling kind of all right and something just starts to go off, it's usually your body sort of trying to give you signals. And if I kind of had to pile them into a bucket, there's a lot of them related to energy. So all of a sudden, if you're just tired, you're always exhausted, you wake up, you can't drag yourself up in the morning, or maybe at night when you try to go to bed, you're just super wired, but your body is just exhausted. Those are the things that should not be happening. Sort of the fatigue is one bucket. Another bucket is the thing that I've used to struggle with, which is weight changes. All of a sudden you gain really a lot of weight, all of a sudden you just dropped a lot of weight and you can't put it on. Those things kind of unexplained weight gain, weight loss. So there's fatigue, there's weight management. The next bucket is mood swings. So it's particularly the sort of emotions. All of a sudden, maybe you feel more irritable, more anxious, maybe more depressed, and these sort of sudden mood changes. One day you feel amazing, the other day you feel completely different, and it just almost makes no sense why such changes. And the next bucket is sleep is big one, and particularly if now you're starting to wake up in the middle of the night, maybe you are having difficulty staying asleep, or you find it very difficult to wake up in the morning. Those are the things that could be affected. And also for some women, it's the skin issues. All of a sudden, they have a lot of acne breakouts, eczema, unwanted hair growth, this sort of things that are all of a sudden, because skin is one of our biggest organs and it will really showcase the things that are happening in our body. So those are some of the obvious things that can be popping up. And if it's all of a sudden came out of nowhere, then that's a good sign that something needs to be paid attention to.
In regards to the acne and hair growth, are there
Yeah.
specific areas where, because I don't know if this is true or not, heard that, hormonal acne is in a different location on your face. And, obviously we expect some hair growth in normal places, but then in
Yeah.
other places it's a bit weird. What's normal and what's maybe not?
Yeah. So when it comes to, there is like a skin mapping that people do just to take a look at different places. But what it is really, the kind of the things to keep in mind is the skin issues is oftentimes the reflection of what's happening on the inside. And usually the women that I work with that come to me with cystic acne or just with acne in general, usually there's something going on with the gut bacteria that gets imbalanced. And oftentimes when we work on their gut bacteria by introducing more fiber, like different fruits and vegetables, and particularly creating a large variety of colors of vegetables, like everything from aubergine to zucchinis, tomatoes, carrots, all kinds of colors, and then bringing in some probiotics and prebiotics, things like kefir, sauerkraut, or prebiotics like onion, garlic, artichoke. As we're bringing those things, it doesn't happen overnight, but the body, as you start to replenish your gut, your skin sort of magically starts to, so magically, it starts to clear out because the gut bacteria, we basically, inside of our bacteria, inside of our gut, we have the most amount of bacteria. We have a lot of bacteria living on our body, and we kind of like the amount of bacteria to cells that we have is 10 to 1. So we're kind of like a one walking bacteria, I guess, if we really were to look at it, just how much we've got of it. So as we start to, but the biggest concentration is in our gut. So as we start to work on our gut and try to bring it back into balance, the skin typically will start to clear up, and things like eczema in particular, because it sort of shows up out of nowhere, but there's more and more research coming up to link eczema to nervous system dysregulation and to stressors. And it's really coming down to taking care of your nervous system, being able to regulate yourself, finding that safety in your body, and really, really paying attention to stress massively. And for some people, it's doing regular co-regulation practices, be that through meditation. Mindfulness is a big one. For some people, being with animals is extremely beneficial. So sort of just finding the things, people that you love, finding the things that could able sort of regulate you and bring you into balance. Eczema has a big link to that. And there's also like the zits that are popping up just at the specific time of the cycle and maybe like a week before your period. Those can be related to typically the change between estrogen progesterone that happens in the second half of our cycle that can trigger the breakout. And once again, taking care of your gut and of your digestive system will slowly clear those things out that you will have a clearer skin.
Okay, amazing, cool.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've, sort of spoken about periods, being maybe abnormal or painful. I want to move on to the new, another, I guess, buzzwords that we're hearing a lot of: PCOS and endometriosis.
Yeah.
At least in my life, it feels like I'm hearing that more people have it. And I don't know if that's actually true or not, but it feels like it's on the rise. I want to know, is it actually on the rise? And if so, why? And what's actually going on? I know they're two separate things, so we can address them separately, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So PCOS, as you call it, PCOS, as I call it, if I refer to either or, we're talking about the same thing. It basically stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. And the idea with PCOS is that the underlying root cause of it, oftentimes women get diagnosed once they have polycystic ovary, because it is in the name, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Basically, you have this little cysts on your ovaries, and essentially as your egg is trying to get ruptured, it doesn't get ruptured enough, so it creates a zit, then it creates another zit, then it creates another zit, and it's kind of creates this polycystic ovaries. But you can have polycystic ovaries but not have a polycystic actually diagnosis, because really the main thing of PCOS is the excess of androgens, and androgens is what we know as the male hormone. So people would be most familiar with the hormone testosterone, which is a typically male hormone, but basically PCOS is actually truly the collection. It's not a disease, it's more the collection of symptoms of excess testosterone. Too many male hormones in the female body create PCOS. And the reason that it happens is because in our ovaries, our estrogen and testosterone, they use certain enzyme to convert from testosterone into estrogen, those hormones, so that way we can have more estrogen, which is more female hormone. But when we have a lot of presence of insulin, which is our blood sugar hormone in our bodies, that conversion between testosterone and estrogen doesn't happen. So it doesn't actually, one doesn't convert into another, so we have too much testosterone. And when we have too much testosterone in our body, it's kind of like when we're putting a female body with too many male hormones, the body stops ovulating. We're no longer able to perform our functions of sort of getting pregnant in very sort of simple terms. So when we have, but the way that signal gets interrupted is through insulin, which is our blood sugar hormone. So the reason that it's on the rise is because our diets are more and more gets convenient. We have way more breads, we have way more carby things, we have a lot of sugar, we start our days with, I don't know, sweet breakfast, and it's because of this blood sugar dysregulation. At the moment, there is 94% of population, so basically all of us have irregular blood sugar spikes throughout the day, and about 80% of people have some sort of metabolic issue, and about, I think in America, the percentage, I can't imagine UK is being too much behind it, is about 60% of people that are pre-diabetics. And this pre-diabetics is basically creates this insulin resistance. So when we have too much insulin, our body produces insulin in response to sugar. So we eat sugar, pancreas produces insulin in order to take that blood sugar out of our blood and put it into our cells to give us energy. But when we eat sugary things, we rarely go for runs. We usually eat sugary things and then we sit down, continue working back in our office. That insulin keeps collecting in our body. And at some point, as we keep eating, the pancreas is just puts out insulin, so our body becomes resistant to insulin. It's just kind of like, okay, let's just keep producing this insulin because the sugar is going to keep coming, so let's just keep putting it out. And when we have that excess of insulin, it starts to create, that is the root cause issue for 90% of PCOS cases. It's the insulin resistance. So it is on the rise, and our diet and our stress have a lot to do with that. Particularly stress, because when we're stressed, again, as I mentioned, in short term, the idea with stress is that our body shuts down the digestion and all the other organs in order to send the blood to our muscles to run away from danger. Of course, with 70% of stress being perceived, this danger sort of, the cortisol raises, but when our body sends the energy into muscles in order to run away from danger, it also rises the blood sugar in our body. When the blood sugar rises, the insulin rises. So it's sort of like it's caught in this mix of things, but the underlying cause is really increasing this blood sugar and insulin, which ultimately stops your body's conversion from testosterone to estrogen. You have too much testosterone in your body, you stop ovulating, your periods get longer, all of a sudden your cycles at 35-day plus, you're starting to have unwanted hair growth, you started to have a lot of sort of the pimples, the hair thinning, and all of those symptoms come because we have too many testosterone, too much androgens in our blood. So yes, it is absolutely on the rise, and that would be the reason why. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So PCOS, I would assume, because it's so connected to insulin then, that in the same way that if someone is diagnosed as being a pre-diabetic or even a type 2 diabetic, it is reversible through a lot of work. So I would imagine it's the same with PCOS?
Yeah, because PCOS is not a disease, it's more so the collection of symptoms. So you can put those symptoms into remission, so that way you're able, same as you said with diabetes and pre-diabetes, you can put those symptoms in remission with the diet and with the lifestyle. It's just, you have to work with somebody who understands it, because oftentimes when you go to the doctor, especially with PCOS, people just tell you to eat less carbs and move more and eat less. But when you have imbalanced insulin, it's a very difficult thing to say to somebody, eat less. It's just, it creates so many more imbalances in such an unhealthy relationship with food. It's not about eating less for women with PCOS. It's about eating more of the right foods and having more of the lifestyle things or the supplementation that is actually benefits, but too much mainstream advice, again, because we have 2.5% research going into women's health, is given in such a flat line offer that is just simply not helpful. But yes, it's more eating more protein, it's not cutting out breakfast, it's doing a lot of resistance training, because oftentimes the thing that takes the most insulin is actually our muscles. And if we resistance train, it will take as much of it as possible. And so many girls love to do cardio because we think it's better thing, but actually the best thing for girls is to start resistance training, especially if you have PCOS, because you will put those conditions in remission. You also look better and feel better in your body.
Okay, interesting. So for someone with PCOS, I guess the takeaway is probably try and get some external help, because it's going to be really difficult, because your insulin is going to be already a bit dysregulated to try and handle it. Obviously,
Yeah,
try and improve the way that you're eating, your diet, more
definitely.
fiber intake, more of, like you mentioned, pre and probiotics, etc.
Exactly.
And resistance training, so that more glucose is going to the muscles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Into the
Okay.
muscles. And you don't necessarily need to immediately go and hire expensive doctors or expensive
Yeah.
um like you able, it's not like you doomed if you're unable to maybe financially afford it. There's a lot of information out there, but just make sure when you get flat out advice of eating less and exercising more, there's more to it. And I think that kind of advice is actually does so much more harm to the girls and to women in general than actually is helpful. Just really being able to
100%.
find the accurate information.
And then potentially introduces that element of, controlling what you're eating and creating different problems,
Yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
And the eating
Um,
disorders are on the rise. Exactly. So like that just creates such an unhealthy relationship with the
yeah.
food. It actually has to be the opposite. Hmm.
Is our modern diet, is our modern lifestyle also contributing to endometriosis, or is that something different?
Yeah, so endometriosis is a slightly different disease, and it's basically typically rooted in having way too much estrogen in our body, and that excess estrogen creates the growth of lesions, so growth of extra tissue around, or usually around the uterus, and then within the uterus and outside of uterus, there's a different condition called adenomyosis, but basically works by the same sort of principle. And endometriosis, as those lesions start to grow, oftentimes they're quite inflammatory, and particularly around the period, which is why they cause so much pain and they cause so much bleeding.
Mhm.
There are some women who will have endometriosis and won't have any pain, but more likely than not, endometriosis will feel like an extreme condition of pain. And yes, the biggest contributor to endometriosis that we sort of see with women is these toxins that we often our environment is so consumed with. They're called xenoestrogens, or basically the estrogen that comes from like toxins. As women we just take the most amount of toxins in general, because we are the ones that use the creams, the makeup, the
Mhm.
washing liquids, the things that, so we actually naturally get more exposed to chemicals for that reason, which is why you want to limit, like sort of minimize the toxic produce and just detox your body as much as possible. And when I talk about detox, I'm not talking about juicing. I'm talking about consuming less products that have like less toxic things in them. So I really like the app called Yuka, Yuka. It's
I
actually a
have
French
that app.
app. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so amazing. But it's so easy. Like you just go and you scan the products with the barcode, and it'll give you sort of kind of like the traffic light, red, yellow, and green sign of the good and bad products, and choose the ones that are better. The more expensive doesn't mean better. Like the ever so famous Moroccan oil that I used to love so much for my hair is actually mega
Mm,
toxic. So it's
yeah.
like there's actually so many things to it. And anything that smells nice usually has an element called phthalates in it that actually creates more toxins. And for women with endometriosis, it's that much more important that they have cleaner both diets and also cleaner xenoestrogens in general.
Is it that they were, genetically more likely to get the lesions and then toxins make it worse? Or was it a chicken egg
Yeah.
situation? We don't know which ones come first.
Definitely could be a combination. A genetic aspect is a big one, actually, both for PCOS and endometriosis. If your mom or your, I don't know, grandma has it, you are more likely
Yeah.
to have it. But you certainly, the lifestyle, it's kind of like genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger, because genetics can create certain predisposition. But if your environment and if you sort of, if your diet is more healthy, if you're taking, if you need supplementation or certain herbs, and if you take care of yourself, if you move, you can really reduce the with the worsening of the condition and take care of it. And of course, in that, we also do have conventional medicine, which is the reason that it's there. It's really helpful for some women with, though I believe that birth control does more harm to women than good. In some cases, and particularly with endometriosis, birth control can actually be extremely painful if it means that you get back the time and you're no longer spending week, 2 weeks just completely curled up in so much pain. Like using that without shaming yourself into needing to
Mhm.
use it, be just, and that's what really comes down to understanding of the things, so you can be more, yeah, you can be just more understanding of what needs to happen.
Okay, so two quite different conditions. If you had to, speak to women who are struggling with endometriosis, or maybe they think they might have it due to extreme period pain, what are three things maybe that you've seen clients of yours be able to slightly remit maybe their symptoms of, or
Yeah.
remit the disease in general? What three things would you say?
Yeah, I love that. So endometriosis is a, because it's condition of excess estrogen, and estrogen is what we call anabolic hormone. Anabolic hormones are the hormones that makes things grow. So estrogen is basically the reason that we grew our boobs, grew our bums, and have this sort of curves. It's the hormone that helps us grow things. It also helps us feel confident and so many other benefits. But estrogen, because it's that growth hormone, it grows those lesions more. And when the reason that we have too much estrogen, there's a couple of reasons. It's either because our liver is not detoxifying, liver and gut is not detoxifying it fast enough out of our body, because the hormones get exited from our body through liver and gut. So those two things need to be in shape, or we're taking in too much toxins into our body and our body is not
Okay.
able to do it through chemicals. So the top three things, I think the number one is just to eat more fiber, but particularly green leafy stuff, and like the brassica family or the cruciferous vegetables. So things like Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. If you Google cruciferous vegetables or brassica vegetables, those would be the most, these are the ones that you should have more in your diet, just to allow to get it out of your system. What that does, that it helps for estrogen to bind to the fiber, and then it just comes out through poop and pee, so it basically comes out
Fine.
of it. The second thing is download Yuka app and just scan all the products, or scan all of the stuff that you've got at home, to make sure that your product are actually is much more cleaner in general, which is extremely helpful. And another thing with endometriosis that helps, oftentimes taking out things like gluten or dairy. I don't
Mhm.
often promote things to just take things out, but oftentimes for some people, because gluten is so highly inflammatory, it can
Right.
create more pain. So when you cut it out a little bit, it might help. For a person listening, you might want to take it out for maybe like 3 weeks, see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, slowly bring it back, so we're not cutting out food groups, but sometimes taking out those things can actually reduce the inflammation and therefore make you feel much better.
Cool.
Mhm.
In general, are there particular supplements? Do you believe in supplements? Is it just a fad? Do you think that certain supplements can help in certain phases of our cycle at all?
Well, supplements are not regulated. So literally any
Mm.
dojo can just basically make a supplement and put it on. So when you do choose supplements, it is important that you look at the label and that it's third party tested or USDA certified. So just to make sure that they actually legitimate. Supplements are there to supplement. So they're there to sort of top up on things that we maybe not getting from things. So for example, for maybe vegetarians that are vegetarians for whichever reason, the some of the B vitamins, zinc can only really be found in complete form in animal products. So supplementation could be necessary for things um, like for things like endometriosis. The one supplement that I do believe in and that I do recommend is magnesium, because magnesium is the first mineral that women get depleted when we get under stressed. And I mean, we all sort of stressed in one way or the other. And it's 85% of women are deficient in that mineral. And it's often the reason we feel so moody and crazy sort of before our period. Again, we do need to make sure that those supplements are good quality. But some of them can be quite useful, and I do recommend them, but I also always recommend them only particular ones for particular conditions and for a short period of time, because we don't want to create one of those things where we become dependent on the bottles. I do believe in the food as medicine approach first, because there is so much in good quality foods. If you're able to get good quality vegetables, fruits, good quality of meats, our body is able to extract a lot of those nutrients from foods. But sometimes maybe you're a bit too stressed and you need some things like magnesium that I mentioned. It can be quite useful. Or for vegetarians, things that they can't get from meat sources can be also quite useful.
Have you noticed that women with certain diets struggle more with their cycles or periods, such as, vegan compared to carnivore or whatever, or anything like that? Or do you believe everyone has their own individualized approach to diet?
Yeah, I do think that everyone has their own approach to diet, and I do think that people of different diets did it well. Unfortunately, the thing is, like, sometimes people go on a diet and it just becomes. I mean, I don't think that anybody should diet. Period. If you're gonna do any diet, you should do Mediterranean, that
Yeah.
consists heavily of fresh fruits, vegetables, fish. I don't. Though I work with vegans and I know a lot of people that are vegan, I just think most of the time veganism is done very wrong, and we usually switch to things like it can be a lot of carbohydrates that we taking in. And in general, from what I've seen, women who are eating sources of animal products, they do much better when it comes to hormones than the ones that don't. And though sometimes we can be quite rigid in our views, I would really question them, sort of, where are you getting those sort of the information from, and just to see, are you willing to continue leading to your lifestyle because of a particular belief versus actually having a healthy family. Like, I know a lot of vegans, and they do come in my practice, that are struggling to get pregnant, and it's because in order for our hormones to produce, we do need to have healthy fats, because the hormones are made from cholesterol, and we need protein, and it's just vegans typically don't get enough of it. And the problem with most women that I see is just they don't get enough protein. But really, if you wanted to use a rule of thumb, is the Mediterranean style diet is probably the best, where there is
Yeah.
plenty of beans, some grains, there is vegetables, fruits, olives, like very colorful diet as much as possible. And of course, like with things like keto, then you take too much of that and then you completely take away carbohydrates, and women need carbohydrates to be able to ovulate. And it's like, not anything that's too dogmatic or cutting promotes to cut out the foods. I would just really question it, because it's not the way that we're meant to function. It's so much easier if we just relax and eat whole food diet.
Fine. Agreed. Yes. Okay. Um, Final topic, the pill. I have a lot of friends who have been on the pill since, so I'm 25 now, since they were 14, so 10 plus
Yep.
years. Um, I think some are scared to come off. They're scared, they don't know who they are without the pill. I think some have no intention, it works for them. They also, like I said previously, they see having a period as an effort and stuff, which, it's each of their own.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who have been on the pill for such a long period of time? Because right now it's advertised as if the only real risk is maybe you might get a blood clot. That's at least the impression that,
Yeah.
the what we speak about. So what would you say to that?
Yeah. Well, the problem with birth control, it's become a lifestyle medication for so many for pharmaceuticals. The way that it's marketed now, it's like, if you have acne, here's the pill. If you have painful periods, here's the pill. But it's really the same sort of contraceptive thing that really shuts down our ovulation. And the problem with it making a lifestyle medication is that it's becoming much more widely available, and we're much less thinking about the actual repercussion of what the particular medication can create. It can create it, and which is why it's so dangerous that it's sort of becoming this lifestyle thing. When it does, one major thing that pill does, it just shuts down our ovulation, meaning that it shuts down the communication between our brain and our ovaries. But when we
Mm.
ovulate, we produce a very important hormone called progesterone. That's very important for our skin health, for our bone health, and for our nervous system. And there are so many women that living for decades without that hormone, and I don't quite see that. We don't quite see the difference of it, because we're just having women that are coming on birth control after 10 years of it. And it would be very interesting to see if there's any long-term effect on the brain and on other things. But when women are afraid to come off of it because they're going to be a different person, like, nobody had come off of birth control under my watch and just didn't recognize themselves and as a person, become a completely different person. And also there's a lot of thing that, like, you may be becoming attracted to a different partner. And it's true, the
Yeah.
way that we sort of smell and the pheromones do change, but it's not like, don't let those clickbaity things that are, maybe there's some sort of truth to it, be afraid that you're going to come off and not be in love with your boyfriend. Like there's so much more involved than in being loved. There's certainly connection, but it's not as drastically that is drawn on internet. And your body knows how to function. We just need to trust our bodies. And I think there's this message that we can't trust our bodies, but it will come into balance. The things that you really need to worry about is preparing maybe your body a little bit to come off of it. And the true thing is, like, it's such a beat up thing that we talk about all the time that we almost ignore it. But the kind of things that we eat, this sort of anti-inflammatory whole foods diets, the drinking plenty of water, trying to maybe limit alcohol, maybe meditating and being a bit more mindful, all of those things, like the combination of these healthy habits, going to the exercise, combination of those small little habits will get your body will come back into balance. The body thrives in homeostasis. It will always come back to the middle, and it might push you back and forth with certain symptoms as you're coming off of it, but just really allowing your body to come into its natural state. And period pain is not meant to be painful. It's created because of inflammation. So once again, as you take out this inflammatory food, add more fruits and vegetables, really fall in love with cooking, with making really dead simple recipes and bowls, can make such a big difference. And it's such a gift to live in the female body. And the more we reject it because we're afraid that we're going to be a different person, like, you won't. Like, it's just not
Yeah.
realistic to tell people that. And I think it's I just think that relying on something that is not really the way that we're meant to rely, just for like acne that's simply rooted in gut health and those things, like, these are the things that are reversible. There are reasons, of course, that you should be on the pill if it truly means that the quality of life changes, like with people with endometriosis, and you feel like you've tried different things and there's no other options. That is completely okay, but definitely going one side or completely sort of the other, I would give you a chance, your body a chance to kind of reconnect with its own self, because there's so many gifts that our female body carries. Just need to tune into them, trust it.
Yeah. If
Mm,
someone is taking like the progesterone only pill, for example,
yeah.
does that make it better or not?
So there is no pill of progesterone. It's usually progestin that they take, which is a synthetic hormone.
Right.
Different, really different side effects for different people. The doctors will try to put you on different things in order to kind of find the things that work for you. One thing that we got to remember about doctors in conventional medicine, though it is extremely useful in things like if you broke your leg or like you have some serious conditions that you do need to go to the doctors. Unfortunately, and I've interviewed many doctors on my podcast, all they could telling me that the doctors have become pharmaceutical technicians. So this is the reason that every single time you're going to go to the doctor, you will always walk out with a pill, because doctors' job and the way that they sort of paid, especially, I think a bit less so in Europe, but certainly in Americas, just a lot of the pushing of medications on people, and once again taking away the agency from our bodies. So like we always will walk away with the pill. So whether it's progestin and other sort of things, sometimes the side effects would be different. I know personally, once I went on progestin, my mood just tanked so deep and so low that it just didn't work for me. So for some people, it might work better or less. But again, I would ask yourself, why are you on it, and what are the things that are fully in your control? Because there's so much in your control when it comes to health. And if you're in the driver's seat of your health, it's just so much better and so much more empowering. Mm,
Yeah. So you right now we kind of we don't know. There isn't enough research. We haven't been taking the pill for long enough to kind of determine, I guess, whether
yeah,
there is a long-term side effect. But your point to argue is that the body likes to be in homeostasis. The body is able to function
yeah,
normally. You can hear yourself, there's more of a
yeah.
connection kind of. Um, Interesting. Yeah. No, I always find hormones quite interesting because I always think of them as, you have it, you add something in, but then as soon as you stop taking it, is it gone? Like, is that it? Like, did you just kind of
Yeah.
alter things for a little bit? And, you know, uh, I know a lot of people who say they got off the pill, but then it took them a really long time to maybe get their period back or to start thinking straight, or, do you see this often that it takes a while?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
definitely true. Yeah. For women, it'll take on average from about a month 3 months to probably regain cycle. For some women, depending how long you've been on it, it can take up to 18 months to really regain the cycle.
Wow.
So there is the transition off period. I don't want to paint a picture where you're going to come off and back, normal to normal. Your periods are regular and normal for any reason that you would have gone on the pill. If you went for heavy periods, painful periods, or maybe for acne, there is a risk that those symptoms will come back, which is why it's so important to really understand what did you go into it for and what is the root cause? Why is it actually happening? And then address that issue, which is the reason that I work directly with the root cause issues, because the pill is a band-aid. It band-aids a solution for the temporary solution. But if you really want to get to the bottom and really take care of your health, you got to understand what did you go on it for, because the chances that those symptoms will come back is very, very real. And it also, if you shut down your communication system between brain and the ovary being on the pill for almost 10 years, it does take time for that system to restore and to talk back with yourself. Because the thing that I should add to it is just, it's the patience and like allowing things. We live in a society of instant gratification. We just live in the places where we want things so quickly. But once you set the expectation that it might take time, but I do want to have a healthy body. And of course, the girls that are listening, probably somewhat your age, so the late 20s, as you push closer to 30s, you're going to start thinking about wanting to have a baby. And there are so much research that's coming in that to say, recently, there is a research said to come back that the women that came off of birth control and had a kid within 18 months, 24 months, their kid was more likely to have, I believe it was something mental health issues or something, or some sort of a physical health issues, because pill depletes nutrients from your body, and in order for your body to carry a baby, you need as many nutrients as possible. So if you're in the depleted state, yes, you come off of birth control, maybe you started to ovulate, maybe you got pregnant very quickly, but the risk on your baby is just too big to put on, because if your body is in depleted state, it's just not going to be, there is even the smallest risk that your baby might not be perfect is massive for any mother or for any girl of a young age. So just even keeping that in mind, allowing your body be patient so it can regain balance.
How is the body being depleted? I think that's an interesting thing to talk about, because I think
Yeah.
people don't understand. Like, so I think maybe actually knowing could be helpful.
Yeah. So when we take birth control, it's a lot of hormones. We pump a lot of hormones into our body.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, our gut and our liver is responsible for taking out those hormones. Because birth control is a foreign pill, as it goes in, the body will naturally react. So it does create inflammation within our body. So it'll create inflammatory response. And for the body to create, sort of cover it, it will pull nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin B, zinc, selenium. All of those nutrients will pull up in extra. The body will start taking it in other places in order to quickly process it out of your gut, out of your liver, and exit it out of the system. So those are the nutrients that get depleted, because it's the inflammatory response from the pills that need to get sort of exited through the body, and it'll start pulling those nutrients, which is why often before I take women off of birth control, I add the supplementation just so we can pump the body with things like B vitamins, zinc, and specific nutrients that the body gets depleted from. And if we can top that up once they come off of birth control, the transition is much easier. Just creates a bit less inflammation.
Really interesting. I don't think I didn't even think of it like that, but it makes a lot of sense that you are adding something more. So there is always a cost, isn't it? The body has to eliminate the excess almost. Yeah, it makes sense.
Exactly. So, and then if you it's depleting vitamin Bs, but you're now vegan or vegetarian, you're on the pill, you're already not taking any medication. It just creates a whole, and then we're like, oh my gosh, why do I feel so terrible? You're like, well, let's take a look at your lifestyle. And usually that's where a lot of the answers are.
It is like a puzzle piece, kind of, isn't it? Because if you're using that diet, then that's going to affect it. Really interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think about getting a hormone panel blood test? Do you recommend girls get this done? I know in the UK and the NHS this isn't really a thing. But do you recommend it or not?
I would ask why. Like, why do you want to do it? Because if you want to do it because you actually experiencing some sort of symptoms, you have changed your diet, you've added all of the things, and nothing is happening, then I would look into it. Typically, and I'll send you a link. I've created a free hormone quiz, which I think I maybe shared with you guys earlier. You can just include it in the show notes so people can download it. And every single hormonal imbalance will have a symptom. So the quiz will have list of symptoms, and for you just sort of check off on the list which symptoms you have more or less of, it will tell you which hormones are off balance, because
Fine.
the body's language is symptoms, so it'll tell you within symptoms. Those tests can be useful. They also can be quite expensive to just basically find out exactly what your symptoms could have told you. And oftentimes when I talk to women and I work with them, I understand what's happening through symptoms. We make targeted changes and things just go away. So it usually gets fixed. But it's often when maybe there's like a thyroid issues, and we briefly spoke earlier before recording this. Oftentimes for thyroid, when we go to the doctors, they only test TSH, so the thyroid stimulating hormone. But with our thyroid, we have so many things. We have our T3s, T4s, we've got our antibodies. So if you suspect that you might have some thyroid issues, maybe with weight issues, maybe with other things, and getting a full thyroid panel, that's something that can give quite a bit of information. But thyroid health is so closely connected to gut health, because we've got T4, T3, the active and inactive form of thyroid, and the way that they convert is actually happens in the gut. So if for any reason you already have a lot of digestive issues, maybe you're always constipated, bloated, there's a lot of gut issues, and then your thyroid is potentially also off. So oftentimes when we do fix the gut, the liver, the thyroid bodies start working again. But sometimes knowing that is helpful. But I wouldn't be using the thyroid, the hormonal panel as the first thing to go and test. I would look first at your lifestyle, because there's so much in your control without really needing to do really expensive tests.
Awesome. Okay, good to know. All right, yeah, I have one final question, which is
Yeah.
quite random, but I've always thought this. Do you think that menopause is natural? Do you think that we make it worse for ourselves based on the lifestyle we've lived before, or is menopause just a natural part of being a woman?
Menopause is a natural part of being a woman. The thing is, like, when we in our mothers, like in basically her womb, as we get born, I believe we're born with in our mother's womb, we have about 2 million eggs in our ovaries. Then by the time we're born, there is a million, and it starts to decline. And by the time we're 30, there's a very, I think there's like, I don't remember exact number, but I think it's 200,000 rings a bell. So there's less and less and less of eggs that we have available within the reserve. And it's completely normal process. At some point, we run out of eggs, and our body is we're no longer experiencing ovulation. Our body is no longer popping sort of estrogen, progesterone, and naturally we transition into a phase. I don't think that we make it sooner. I think what we do make sooner is the puberty, and we see that the girls are now having puberty as early as 7, 9 years old, which is like, I know I had it, I think I was 12 or 14, somewhere around that age. So the girls are having puberty much sooner now, because of endocrine toxins and because of the toxins that we've got in our environment that pushes women to ovulate sooner. Because the toxins, we call them xenoestrogens, meaning foreign estrogens. The way that they get into the female body, they mimic our natural estrogen, which sends us into the puberty sooner. And women we have more estrogen, but also hormones. Women have more body fat on their bodies. It's normal. We have to have more body fat for ovulation and for being able to carry a baby. And fat is where the hormones can easily store and like sit in large amounts. So girls are having sooner puberty. We're not really pushing menopause, and we can't really necessarily go away from it. It's one of those things that is just a natural part of the process. And I do think that we have to not be afraid and welcome it.
Are the because I know some people don't really have that many menopause symptoms, some just kind of blaze through it.
Hold 1 second. Sorry, I've got the alarm, which would have been ringing. Let's go on.
I thought that was a bird. It's fine. No, yeah, I was saying, some people, it seems they don't really experience that many symptoms. Some people are struggling every night, sweating, mood swings. So is that part linked, or is that just, it is what it is?
Lifestyle is a huge part of how much of it we experience, but
Fine.
also 85% of women will experience some sort of menopausal symptoms,
Okay.
and some will experience more, some will experience less. And when it comes to sort of, at first we don't, after our reproductive years, we don't go into menopause right away. We go in what's called the perimenopause, which is the phase that can last up to 10 years. And for some women, it can begin as early as 35 years. And this is the time when our period starts getting a bit irregular. So the estrogen kind of gets a bit erratic as to how it produces. So then we go into this perimenopause phase, and it's in the perimenopause, which is where a lot of those changes happens, because our hormones regulate our mood, our energy, how we sleep. So naturally, as we start to have shifts in them, we're going to start affecting in sleep, in the way that body regulates temperature, which is the hot flashes, the moods, all of those, the rage. That's when it starts to come off within that perimenopause. And menopause, it's typically after you haven't had a period for 12 months. That is classified going into menopause. And menopause actually just 1 day. So menopause is 1 day of 12 months when you didn't have your period, and then you go into postmenopause. So, and that's sort of the way that it happens. The symptoms, I worked with women with a lot with perimenopause, and naturally we were able to get rid of hot flashes, reduce the symptoms, and like support these things. Won't necessarily happen for everybody in that way, but there's one thing that has happened that I'll mention back in the day where we've done very incorrect documentation of what HRT or hormone replacement therapy does to our bodies. Basically, the report came out and it didn't come out right to saying that if you get hormone replacement therapy, you're more likely to get breast cancer, and everybody got scared, got off of it. And it really affected women for many generations, because hormone replacement therapy is actually can be life-saving to so many women. But there is a bit of this narrative of we're afraid to go not natural, but it's so much nicer. You can also get bioidentical hormones once you sort of get to that age. I would definitely, if you have symptoms that are truly debilitating, you're not feeling really well in your body, if you take a little bit of either bioidentical or whichever hormones that you need to take, it is true you will have to take them for the rest of your life, but it is so much nicer to do that than be raging for 10 years, sweating and just completely not feeling like yourself. Like, you kind of have to choose, and for each person it will be individual. But if you somebody that is transitioning and you going crazy, it's really worth talking to the doctor and doing the test and getting those things. I've got one of my really close friends. She's 60. You would never think so. She's one of the youngest people I've ever met in my life. She hikes mountains. She feels incredible. She looks fantastic. And I was like, what's your secret? She's like, listen, I've never experienced perimenopause symptoms because as soon as I started to get it, I got this progesterone cream, and it takes me 2 seconds every single day, but I've never felt better. And all of those horror stories, I just never heard them. And simply seeing her living her best life, like keeping up with me in my 30s, being 60, I'm like, she's a walking reason for why you should do it.
Yeah.
It can be so much better quality. So those are certainly the options that we shouldn't rule out for the sake of only staying natural. If it does mean that it affects your quality of life, I think we've got resources. Our medicine is at the level where we're able to support our bodies.
Definitely. And just one quick final thing, really interesting about the puberty thing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And is there anything off the top of your head, like typical products that contain these xenoestrogens that maybe people can look out for?
Yeah, well, things that you apply on your whole body. So like the body lotions is a big ones if you're using them. Deodorants, because we love to put aluminum in it. Those are big ones. Face creams, shampoos, conditioners, and it's not like you should completely eliminate them. Like there are some shampoos that are used, it just works for my hair, but it's not green on yucca. But as long as I support my liver and my body to be able to exit those things in the normal amounts, then it will happen. But the things that will have the most of it is also things that smell really nice. So all of the stuff that smells like vanilla, lavender, like you're not meant to smell like vanilla or lavender, you're meant to smell like a human. So is your vagina. Putting things that smell into our vagina is also terrible.
Yeah.
Like any sort of like sprays that you need to let it smell like a vagina. And it's sort of the same things, anything that goes all over our bodies, our creams, those some of the things that are some of the ones that are probably the biggest culprits.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is all my questions. Thank you so much for
Amazing.
coming on. It's been really good, and I
Thank
feel
you.
like I've learned things that I didn't know before, so I hope I'm sure other people will too. But
Good.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always good to see you, Jess.
You too. Awesome. Okay, cool.
Thanks.
I'll end it. How do I end it? Stop.